Well, we're doing something a bit different, a bit special today. Last episode, I spoke about the story around. Part of it was around Gymtrack, my last startup, but really specifically talking about how it almost got acquired. I almost became a millionaire, and then obviously I didn't. And so that actually resonated maybe more than I thought. And so what I decided is, we've been doing these episodes with Rob Woodbridge, who was for the second half of Gymtrack. He was the CEO that we brought in. And I thought, well, why not bring my co-founder, Lee Silverstone, who's the person I started Gymtrack with in the first place. And let's pull on some threads and just tell some of the Gymtrack stories, because it's fun to do it for us selfishly. And second of all, I think there's going to be some pretty interesting observations, lessons learned, whatever, for everybody listening. So with that said, Lee, welcome to the show, man.
Man, thank you. It's nice to be on finally. I like it.
You made it, dude. This is it.
This is the pinnacle of my career. I'm finally on the Product Market Fit Show.
Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show, brought to you by Mistral, a seed stage firm based in Canada. I'm Pablo. I'm a founder turned VC. My goal is to help early stage founders like you find product market fit. And I should say, I think like different perspectives now, Lee, after Gymtrack, started a few other startups, and now he's starting another startup. He's like in the very early, this is like pre-seed, like a month into it. Rob,
three months into it.
3 months into it.
We're super far along now.
Right, that's it. Everything's already done. Product market fit accomplished. And then Rob is a COO of a startup that's probably more like Series A stage. And then obviously me on the VC side. So it'll be interesting to get different perspectives. Anyways, let's jump in. Lee, like I think a good place to start, because I actually haven't done this on the show, is talking about, and this is an episode I've done with so many other founders, we just haven't done it with Gymtrack, which is how we came up with the idea in the first place. Let's jump into that. Like how was Gymtrack born?
Man, I think it was honestly you and me we lived in this house, this like college house together, this university house together, which is where we started our first business together. It's where we started My Tutor, and we were kind of using it as our home/office. And do you remember there was that one room upstairs that maybe like used to be a bedroom, but then it was and we turned it into an office?
Yes. And
we went to Home Depot and we bought this massive like piece of plastic that we turned into a whiteboard.
Oh man, dude, we remember it was the cheapest whiteboard. Whiteboards were too expensive. They were too expensive.
Whiteboards were too expensive. We had gone to Office Depot and we were like, that's how much a whiteboard costs? It's crazy. So we like Googled that you could buy like this, I don't know, it's called like RFP maybe, or like, I don't know, some sort of
like plastic for like bathrooms or something. I don't know. It's like
it was this material they would use for like construction projects, but you could use it as a whiteboard also. And so we went to Home Depot. And actually, now that I'm talking about this, remember we tied it to the
That's what I was going to say. We also didn't want to pay for the truck to bring it. So we put on your Civic.
We were holding this piece of plastic to the roof of your car.
Oh, man.
And it was flapping in the wind like crazy. We drove it back home and we drilled it into the wall. And then, man, we would every single day, we would sit in that office and we would whiteboard ideas.
Which, by the way, might be the worst. I remember listening to Paul Graham back then, and he was like, his kind of thing is you want to, and I forget the exact quote, but like you want to focus on things that are important to you, dive deep into problems with people that interest you. Like that's how you come up organically with startups. And we're like, no, fuck that. Like we're pushing our way to this. Like, I don't care.
Yeah. We're like, we are going to whiteboard our way to $1 billion company.
Right. That's right.
And we would, I don't know, we'd probably have like the show Entourage or something on in the background, or listening to like hip hop music and just whiteboarding ideas. We came up with a few. There were a few ideas that we came up with. One of them, which I think you talked about on the PMF show once before, you talked about in like a LinkedIn post, was like this idea of doing delivery for restaurants before Uber Eats was a thing. So that was one of the ideas we whiteboarded, and we would do this. We had the same playbook. We'd whiteboard an idea. You would look at the market size and see if it was big enough. I would go print a bunch of business cards for the business, and then I would go door to door and I would come back and report what the people said. That was like our playbook.
Just to be clear, because I was way too scared to call customers back then. Like that's like plain and simple. I was like, Lee, you go knock on doors, dude. Like,
Dude, and if I had business cards, I felt like I was the king of the world. I could walk in anywhere. I had a business card. Like everyone had to talk to me. And then, so we were going to these restaurants doing that, right? And like, I don't know, people were like, dude, get out of here. Like, who are you? You know? And so, we're like, yeah, like that's a terrible idea. I think we talked to the guys at I forget the one that skipped the dishes, and they were like, yeah, we're doing that exact same thing. We're like, oh no, like we're gonna get crushed, and so we dropped it. Like literally, like someone very high up at Skip the Dishes we talked to.
They were sick, dude. They were literally 5-6 months old, and they were like unfunded.
And it was like one of the founders or something, and he was like, yeah, we're doing the same thing. Get out of here. Anyhow, and then we did the same thing for Gymtrack. Like one day, like Pablo and I both go to the gym. We still do. It's still a huge part of my life. It was a huge part of my life then. It still is a huge part of my life now. I spend probably 10 hours at the gym a week. And we were like, you know what sucks? Writing stuff down with pen and paper. That was it. That was the impetus for the whole thing. And then it was like, well, wouldn't it be cool if you could track everything automatically? It was like, well, how could you do that? And we just started drawing.
It actually, like, by the way, you're missing one step. You came home one day and you're like, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could, like, people don't know how to do exercises. Like you could scan a QR code and it would tell you how to do the exercise. And I was like, no, that's not cool. You know what is cool?
I don't remember that. That's funny. Okay, I don't remember that. That's awesome.
Then it became, like, what would be cool is like not having to track your reps and weight.
Yeah.
But the first iteration, at least the way I remember it, was, this is what I'm saying, like, and I have, like, as an aside, like, what are the, let's say, findings, even just through the show, is if an idea starts with people who know nothing about an industry saying, wouldn't it be cool if, like, it's
You're
probably,
doomed.
right?
You're doomed.
It's not leading to somewhere that you want it to lead to.
Yeah.
And then it builds, because it's like, oh, QR code's not that cool. Okay, but tracking, kind of cool. And then it was, tracking on select, like weight stack machines, right? You put the pin, it goes up and down. And I remember us talking like, yeah, that makes so much sense. It goes up and down. Like, I'm sure you could track that, but it ain't enough.
It'd be super cool to track that.
Right?
Yeah.
You can imagine how cool it would be.
But then it was, what if you could just track everything? Like, what if you could track the whole workout?
And that's like one of those crazy things too, that like when you look back on it, not to like, digress from the story, but that like lesson of like the everything comment, I think is like one of the scariest things you'll ever hear in a startup is like, well, this product would be cool if it did everything, right? And it's like, it won't be good until it does everything. Is like one of those things that I think back on all the time, which is like, now if I hear a startup telling me something like that, or I'm thinking about a company and it's like, well, wouldn't it be great if, and then it's like, well, it has to track everything and be this like massive platform in order to derive any value from it. You're just like, yeah, that's crazy. Like you can't do crawl, walk, run. And so, it's like one of those things when you look back on it, we should have been like, whoa, like red flags. This is a bad idea.
Rob, by the way, I'm curious your perspective, because you actually, so we met you, I mean, you became CEO like 2016, halfway through. You were VP marketing maybe a few months before that, but I think you and Lee did a podcast like really early days. So you must have had like some outside view of what are these kids doing.
Remember that?
Yeah. Not until just now. I didn't remember that for the past 9 years or whatever it's been, but now I remember that.
It was early on. Like I had my own podcast on tether.tv, and you were like, maybe episode 2 or 3. And I did that for 10 years. So you were really early on. But I found you guys through Invest Ottawa, it was probably Invest Ottawa at that time. Maybe it was Oak Creek, which was an economic development group here in Ottawa. And you were the darling company in it. Like, so every once in a while you have these startups that emerge and they get into this rarefied air where everybody wants to work for them, invest in them, be around them. And it's like this little moment of celebrity, and you poke your head through the clouds and it's sunshine and you can't do any wrong. And that's where I saw you guys. And I thought at the very moment, the way it was described to me after I did the podcast with you, Lee, I literally said there's 2 companies that I wish I could have been involved with in the early stages. One of them was audible.com, because I love audiobooks. And the second one was Gymtrack. I love audiobooks and going to the gym. And can you imagine, like, these are 2 companies right in it. So like I fell in love with the idea. I got it as well. It was like this virus. Wouldn't it be cool? That is so cool. And that's what it was.
This is maybe a perfect segue because you mentioned like we were kind of, let's say, hot shit right back then in Ottawa, by the way, which is like, this is a low bar, but
hey, but you excelled at the low bar.
We excelled at the low bar. That's my thing, man. Big fish, small pond. Like, I'm in.
Yeah.
But you know when that happened? That happened right after, Lee, I don't know if you remember this way, but I remember it like it's kind of step function when we got into 500 startups. We were like kind of whatever, and then we got into 500 startups, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, who are these guys? Like from the perspective of Ottawa community.
Yeah, I think, I rember it a little bit differently in the sense that a bunch of these like accounting firms and law firms started to introduce us to angels. There was this like sense and semblance of like, hey, these guys kind of maybe know what they're doing.
It was build up.
Yeah, and there was like, but there was no kind of like proof point that we had any idea what we were talking about. There was no like anchoring to reality. It was just like, I don't know, maybe they're the smartest people ever, maybe they're idiots. Like, who knows? And so it was kind of this slow burn. But then when we got into 500 startups, that was when everything, it like kind of was this forcing function. I remember being in the airport, flying to San Francisco for the first time, and like walking to the gate and getting a phone call from an angel we had been speaking to who was like, hey, I heard you got into 500 startups. I'm in. Like, let me write a check.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember that? And I was like, hey, like send him the safe in the airport on the way there.
So I've mentioned this story, but I actually didn't live it. So I really want to hear from you and your recollection of how we got into 500 startups, how you got us into 500 startups in the first place. And it started at the beginning because I almost like forced you to not go on this trip.
Yes.
You remember
that?
You
almost kiboshed it. Which in retrospect maybe would have been good for the company. Who knows? Yeah. So I remember the guys at Micrometrics were like near our desk, and there was like in InvestAuto, we were kind of in this open office space, and they were like, hey, we're going to Startup Fest in Montreal. And I think you were like, man, what are we going to go to like a startup festival for? Like, how is there any value in that? I was like, it's networking, it's investors, it's whatever. And you were like, no, man, like that's so stupid. I got work to do. Classic Pablo wants to like get things done and not go to like
100% Pablo right there.
Right? Like it's such a...
Just to be clear, the work I was doing was like getting grants. Like that was
Which is still valuable. That was the work. But I think that's like such a Pablo thing to be like, nah, man, I'm not going to a networking event. Like, no way. There's no value in that. And I was like, cool, like, let's divide and conquer. Like, you hang back, I'll go. And he was like, all right, whatever. And ended up going. And like, to be honest, like, he was probably right. There was not a ton of immense value in going to like, network around. But it was fun. It was a good time. And I remember there was like a group of people surrounding this guy who was like, I don't know, it's wearing like a t-shirt and jeans or whatever. And like my mind, there's no way this guy's an investor. Like in my mind at that time, I hadn't worked in VC yet, didn't know anything about VC. Like that guy was probably like a startup dude or whatever. Or I don't know, he was like doing the sound at the event or something. And so like someone pulled me into the conversation, and they were like, tell this guy what you do. And I was like, oh, we're working on this startup Gymtrack. We're building technology to automatically track what gym goers do in the gym. And I used to, and Pablo, we were talking about this before, but I used to walk around with this like 3D printed piece of hardware that was like this smart pin that we had as part of our product in my pocket. Like we had, it wasn't functional, but it had a logo on it and everything, and it looked super professional.
This is the difference between you and I, right? Because I remember you, and I was like, what is, like, that's just a piece of plastic, dude. Like it's literally a 3D printed piece of plastic that has no value, no function at all. And you're like, dude, trust me.
Yeah, and I think like the point of that was like to show people something tangible, right? Like everyone constantly hears stories from people, but like that's hard to do storytelling in a quick little pitch. If you can like visualize things for people and put something in people's hands that can get tangible with something, that's different and it's memorable. And so I remember like showing this guy who I didn't know was Dave McClure, this smart pin that we had. It was just this piece of plastic I had printed and put in my pocket. And he was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, how far along are you guys? And I was like, yeah, we're raising money. And And he was like, hey, take my card. Like, you guys should move to San Francisco and come do 500 startups. And I was like, oh, yeah, like, I think I've heard of that before. I had no idea what 500 startups was. I didn't know who Dave was. And then we walked away, whatever. And everyone was like, what just happened? Like, there was a group, they were like, what just happened? I was like, I don't know. This guy said we should go do 500 startups. And they were like, what? That's crazy. I was like, I don't. And I called Pablo and I was like, Pablo, do you know what this is? And he was like Googling it.
That's right. I had no idea. No idea.
We had no idea. And then, yeah. And anyhow, Dave had his cell phone number on the card. And so I texted him and I was like, hey, man, like, yeah, I'll take you up on your offer. Let's meet up for a drink later tonight. And we ended up like having a drink. And I think he was smoking a cigar. And I thought it was pretty cool. And I was like, okay, let's go to this 500 start.
This guy's legit.
Yeah, he's legit. He's smoking a cigar. And that was it. And the next day we sat down in this like little investor area. We hammered out some of the terms. We talked to Shane McLean from LaBarge Weinstein on the phone. He was like, okay, Ghouls, hey guys, like, go and sign the documents. Like, you guys are going to San Francisco and you're in 500 startups. You're like, cool. And that was it.
Do you remember, and I don't know if this played into that or not, but there was a startup competition at Startup Fest.
Yeah.
That you won, right? And we do you remember like turning down?
And we turned it down.
Yes,
we turned it down. Yeah. We won the startup competition. We turned it down because we thought the terms were bad or something, because we were like so full
like,
of ourselves.
By the way, like I'm in Ottawa, like not doing nothing but like taking zero risk. You're out there like pitching this company, like trying to win competitions, and you win it. And I have the audacity to be like, dude, those terms are terrible.
Those terms stink. You're like, those terms are terrible.
We're not taking it.
It's so funny. I remember being so mad at you. I was like, dude, what are you talking about? Someone wants to give us some money and you're saying no? I was like, how am I going to work with this guy?
It was like 10%, like 2 million cap. And then Harley from Shopify took your side. Do you remember that? He was like, you know what, you're right. These terms are too aggressive. He was
like, these terms suck. And then there's another story I remember of that too. We went to this like private investor area because you're a psychopath. And on the call with Shane, you were like, these terms suck on the safe or the convertible note with 500 startups. You wanted to negotiate with 500 startups, and you made me do it. You weren't even there. You just were on the phone and you were like, Lee, these terms are unacceptable. Go negotiate. So I go, I'm like 21 years old, idiot. I'm sitting in this investor area. And all of the team of Real Ventures is sitting there. All of the managing partners of Real Ventures are sitting there. And it's me and Dave, and they're sitting right next to us. And I'm this kid. I don't even understand the terms I'm negotiating, but I memorized what you and Shane told me on the phone. And me and Dave McClure are negotiating these terms on the convertible note. And he finally gives in or whatever. I don't remember what happens. 100%. He gets up and walks away. He did give in. He was like, okay, we can accept those changes. He gets up and he walks away, and we're walking away, and then the Real Ventures team stops me and they're like, yo, don't go to 500 startups. We'll make you a competitive offer to come do founding. and we're like, no. Like, and we're negotiating that, whatever. Like, why would you go to San Francisco? And, I forgot that.
But I'll tell you, like, so I think there are two things like I noticed from there. One is like, and I've seen this so many times, the early rounds, like the reality is you raise a Series B or a Series C or whatever, you're doing it methodically. Like you have certain numbers, you're going to go after certain investors, you're going to run a process, and people are going to look at real things. But when you're raising like a pre-seed angel round, there's probably nothing there. Like there's very, very little true signal. That's just the reality of it. And so serendipity plays a huge role, because you can't go out and be like, hey, here's a list of 50 angels. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to run this process. You have no momentum. You have no FOMO, nothing. And so this idea that like you basically let, like, yeah, you got to do some stuff purposefully, but then serendipity has to play a role. And that's why I think ultimately looking back, like these networking events or other situations like this can create catalysts, right? Like nobody could have predicted Dave McClure. We already had done big legwork, getting a bunch of angel investors close to the line where they were like, yeah, it's really interesting. I like you guys. I could do something. But there was nothing we could say to be like, okay, now or never, nothing, until this catalyst event happened. And we had that. And so then we got into 500 startups, and I think we'd raised like $500,000 before getting in. So we back then, that was a lot of money. Today, it's like nothing. But we were one of the most funded startups in 500 because of that mix of like doing the work, but then also generating situations where serendipity can help you create this kind of catalyst event, right?
But one of the questions that always comes up, especially at that stage, right? Because it's the awkward stage. It is like you're 15, you've never asked a girl out, you've never kissed a girl, whatever it might be, and then you're thrust into the, like, you are right there trying to do this for the first time. and without looking like an idiot, or because you really only have one chance to not look like an idiot in front of an investor at that early stage, and really hit on every note that you have to hit for them to be interested, or at least show that they want to work with you. Like that's ultimately, they have the confidence in you. But it's that first step. Like you're right, serendipity. There's old VC in Ottawa from the 90s, Pat DiPietro, who invested billions of dollars in the Ottawa economy, in a bunch of startups in that time period. And he would always tell me, he would say, listen, what you're doing here relies on serendipity, as you said, but it's just called shit luck. Like it's shit luck.
Yeah.
Like that, what you happened with Dave McClure is shit luck. But you took advantage of it. But like you see a lot of startups.
There's two sides to that coin, right? Which is like everyone, I agree, 100% it is luck, but you got to put yourself in the situations to get lucky, right? Like people are like, oh, they just got lucky. No. But like, yeah, man, like I was hustling and grinding and going to all these events. We had probably been to a bunch of events before that had no results, that yielded no results and were a huge waste of time. And it would be so easy to just be like, wow, whatever, I'm just going to sit behind my laptop and just, type away and whatever. But I think you got to put yourself in those situations. You got to do the hard work to get lucky. It doesn't mean you're always going to get lucky. And it doesn't mean that the hard work is going to equate to results. But sometimes if you put in the hard work, you find these opportunities to get lucky.
I think that's true. But we optimized a lot around fundraising. And I was thinking back to the days, and I'm like, man, it's true. In the early days of Gymtrack, and that's what I was saying before. Like I was working on grants. Like literally, our mindset was like, how do we get money? It was not like deliver value. And so it was just how do we get money? And one of the stories that came to mind, which I think we get to riff on a bit, was going to gyms. So I remember this. So I remember we're like, okay, we want to raise money because this is where it all started. We need validation. Like we really need validation. And I remember coming across, and I think it was just like out of Eric Rees, Lean Startup, this idea of a letter of intent. And that just changed. I was like, oh man, no one would sign a contract with us because we have nothing. But people would sign like a completely meaningless letter that just says like, these guys are cool and like, I like the product. Why not? So, and this is where you come in, because again, I wasn't calling customers back. So
what were you doing, Pablo?
I was coming up with the big ideas, man. That was a big idea.
Pablo was the puppet master. He would be like, Lee, go call customers. Be like, yes, sir, I'm on it.
Well, they'd be more than happy to do it. Like that was his skill set. And he was obviously really good at it. And so, yeah, do you remember any of those like specific gym?
Dude, I have two funny stories. So one is 100% I remember that. Like I remember going to the gyms. It was the winter time. And I don't think I had a car at the time. I think you had your Toyota Tercel. And we were like embarrassed.
That was barely a car. I remember when I upgraded to a Civic, you were like, now you have an actual car, because that one just floated in the winter. It would just float. Truly would float.
It was like a 1991 Toyota Tercel. And we would pull up to these customer meetings, and we were so embarrassed of the car. We'd park far away and walk because you didn't want them to see the car pulling up in. Which is just so funny to me, and I think back.
So far, this is every startup cliche I've ever heard.
Yeah,
all so far. Right?
Yeah, it's all best together. And we would print off these letters. I think we actually had a printer, and we would print off these physical letters. We would put their logos on the top. We'd walk into the gym, 3D printed pin or whatever we had, and we would talk to the owners, these like SMB owners. We would say, wouldn't it be cool if, and go off on this pitch about how we're going to automatically track everything. And, and I think even like if I think back and remember on it, I think we made all of the mistakes that you shouldn't make. Like every single mistake that you could make, we made, which was, wouldn't it be cool if not, hey, we're going to solve a real problem for you. How much would you pay for it? Is this a real pain point? Do you think about this every single day? And doing real customer interviews. We were just like, wouldn't it be cool if? And on top of that, we were like, would you just sign this thing? We need it for fundraising. We want to go raise money to build this thing. And if you sign it, it will help us do that. But we're like, sure, we'll help out these 20-something-year-old kids, like 21-year-old kids. And so, letters of intent, I think, generally speaking, don't carry a lot of weight, in my opinion. I'm sure some people disagree with me, but I don't think they do. But we then made them even less valuable because we got people to sign them under the worst pretenses. And so they were meaningless.
Well, I specifically, the one I remember was this one, and these were like city gyms. So city run gyms, these people have no incentives to like, change their gyms, right? And this is a gym that's a club. It's got like a skating rink and a basketball gym, like all these other things, which are just completely meaningless to us. We walk in, we meet the manager, hey, how's it going? This, Lee would have called before, set this up. So, Pablo, Lee, whatever, we're building this thing. And he would start telling us about his gym. Okay, well, let me give you on a tour. Like, sure, we're just kind of playing along. Because we have one goal. It's just like signature, dude, signature. And we're like, yeah, we would track, reps and weight, da-da-da. He's like, a lot of people skate here. I was like, dude, we'll track skating. Like, I don't even remember that. We'll track skating. Why not? And Lee would just be the one to say, like, we'll track it.
Completely forgot about that.
And just like anything that they would ever like, what about like these random like noodle looking things that you like, dude, we'll track it. Like, why not?
Oh my God. That's I'm crying laughing. I forgot about the tracking skating. That's
no matter
so funny.
what the person would say, the level of interest, like if it was 0, we'd still like just pull it out. Like, listen, like I get that you're probably not like, because I get that you're probably not going to buy this. Like, it's totally fine, but like, we're just trying to fundraise. Like, it'd be really nice if you could just sign this thing. Like, take a look at it.
Like, that's the worst idea. There's no value in that. We don't want that for this gym. Our only concern, and the crazy thing is, in those interviews, they would tell us real problems they had. They would actually divulge this real customer info of like, hey, here's actually my problem. Tracking's not that interesting to me, but what's really interesting, and we were like, okay, cool, you're an idiot. We don't care. Sign this letter. We're going to build tracking.
You don't get it.
You don't get it. You don't know your business. We know your gym business better than you do. Yeah. And I think that's like, yeah, and that's that like trap of like this horrible customer discovery, right? Like doing customer discovery the complete opposite way of what you should actually be doing. And again, building this like all or nothing system versus, building this incremental stuff that could actually provide value to customers.
But I think I touched on this before, but I think like because obviously when you tell it, like the way we're telling it makes it sound like we're completely, stupid. Like what are we doing? But there was a driver, right? Which was like, man, we just wanted to be founders so badly. Like we just wanted to have a company so badly, which goes all the way to the starting, like that whiteboard, right? Like it was just methodically trying to force fit and just push out a company. And so the closer you get to that and the more you invest in it, the less you want to hear anything that's going to tell you like, maybe this is not the thing. It's like, I'm committed, I'm in. And so we were just finding ways to validate what we were already going to do. And, and we just didn't want to get stuck having to come up with another idea, because it sucks being in that stage of like, what are you guys doing? Oh, I don't know. We're just like exploring ideas. Like,
exploring.
What is that?
But I think to our defense, like I know we're kind of telling these like funny stories, but I think to our defense, we did really believe at the time, if we build it, they will come, right? Like our belief was people just didn't see it, right? They couldn't understand it. And once we built it, all of these customers would magically appear and we would build this amazing system that like everyone would have to buy it. We'd have all this customer pull. And so I think to a certain extent, it wasn't only just, hey, we want to be founders. I think we did kind of also, buy into the story that, we're going to build this amazing thing and all of a sudden customers are going to appear.
That's a really important part though, because visionaries, people who reinvent the future or invent the future, I would say, don't listen to their customers. Like Steve Jobs is obviously famous for saying that, if you want to invent something that people use, don't listen to your customers, because that's evolutionary versus revolutionary. So in the back of your head, you had to have been thinking like, they don't get it. This is the future. They're just on this path. We're going to move them onto this path, which is the Gymtrack path. And this is where we're going. And they don't see it. But like so many times you have that train of thought that happens that pulls companies through. And then, but I'd say like 99.9% of them don't materialize into something. But for every one apple, you have 1,000 or 1,000,000 other companies that didn't invent the future. But that's what's appealing about it, is that you got two young guys that seemingly more and more, as you say, Pablo, believe in the idea, believe, and then get completely invested, and there's no going back. and now believe the story that they're telling. I mean, it's infectious. It really was. And I think that that's the story that you guys were able to tell. But then you built it.
But I also think, like, to your point, Rob, this kind of like believe and there's no turning back. Like that, I actually think is to this comment I made earlier about the double-edged sword of like getting into 500 startups and raising money, is that like that's the negative side of startups getting validation from the wrong places early on. Startups are Pablo, you said this, I think, in one of the other PMF podcasts or in one of your LinkedIn posts, was like, startups are an experiment, right? They should be treated as an experiment and they should be dealt with as such. And what happens when you get validation, not from customers, but from like VCs, is now all of a sudden you made this promise to people. And now you feel like you can't experiment with customers as much. And so you're like stuck on this trajectory of, hey, we told everyone we were going to go build this thing. We got to go build it. And I think like the longer startups can stay experiments without these external stakeholders, and their only stakeholders are the people on the team and then the customer, the better you can run experiments and the better you can actually find value. And so, to my earlier comment around like, maybe it would have been better if we didn't get into 500 startups. I think sometimes there is truth to that for companies. If you're not really ready to accelerate growth, you're probably better staying an experiment.
I think like the way I'm viewing it now is the later stage of a company you are, the more it makes sense to trade overhead for resources. So like, yeah, let's take more money, let's hire more people so we can have more resources. It's more overhead, but we can do more things. And in the early days, you think that also applies. Like if only I had more money, if only I had a few more developers, you actually want zero overhead. Like the less overhead you have, the more you can twist, turn, try, which is really the thing that's going to get you to something that you
Without
can
the
then
pressure.
invest into. Without the pressure, it's like if we wanted to switch it, expectations, all of a sudden, it's communication to all these investors. It's communication to my entire team versus Lee and I just being like, dude, let's dump this, do something else. And that's it. Like,
yeah, exactly. And again, if you're just two guys or two women or two people or whatever who have good rapport, right? And you're on the same level and wavelength where you're just like, wake up one day, you look at each other and you go, this isn't going to work, right? Like, cool, super easy. Go do something different or change it or go back to the customers and be like, hey, we realize we're idiots. Let us talk to you more and do more customer discovery. But man, like, imagine saying that to a software developer who's been working on a product for 6 months. They're going to pull their hair out and quit. Like, and so, that stuff is, you want to avoid that as much as possible. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Now, I don't want to jump too far forward in the story here, but now picture this, that I've given up everything on all my other companies, and I've come to work as the CEO of this company, and there's 6 of us in a room, and we're kind of 9 months into this new experiment, and I'm sitting at my desk, and we like moved from that big office to the smaller office, and sacrificed all the gym equipment and sold that for rent. Like, this is where we are, right? And Pablo, feet up on the desk, he's like, "Hey," I'm like, "Yeah, this isn't going to work." And that's what he said to me. He says, like, what do you mean? Like, what's not going to work? He's like, this. Like, I just did the math. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work.
But that's 4 years into building the company.
Right.
To have that conversation 4 years ago. It's
I know. But I'm like, what do you mean, Pablo? You're out of your mind. No, this is going to work. It's like, dude, this is not going to work.
This was V2, and this is funny because story from there. So and Lee, you actually. So Lee, just for background, like Lee was at one point, I think we brought Rob in, you stayed around for a while. And then at one point you said, you know what, guys, like, I think I want to go do something else. And you left to do something else, right?
The story with that is that it wasn't ready, right? So I came in to do marketing and lead that. And then, I mean, the product wasn't ready.
Yeah, that was the first time you came to Gymtrack. And then you were like, hey guys, you don't need a marketing team. Yeah, don't waste your money on me. You guys got to go find product market fit. And we're like, okay, cool. We did that for a while. Then we were like, oh my God, our back's up against the wall. We're burning too much cash. We had done this pilot with Anytime Fitness, in the US, which is a whole other story that we should totally talk about. But then we came back and we were like, we got to cut burn. And then we did that. And the board was like, what are you guys doing? It's like, hey, I think we should bring in a new CEO. Like, I'm not the right person for this turnaround thing. And then you came in as the CEO, and then you and I had a similar conversation where we were like, Rob, like, you're the CEO. I don't know what I'm going to do here. Pablo was running the product side. I was like, I don't know how to add value anymore. And we were like, you know what, man, like maybe you're right. And then that was when I was like, okay, I think.
And just for context, at this point, we had gone through the kind of near acquisition that failed. We then laid off. We went from 30 to like 8 people. Obviously, the board was just super upset in general, which is why we brought, and we start, if I don't remember, we're like, legally, we're like, man, we can fight this and we could just push through. And then it was like, you know what, this is going to be so terrible to say, let's bring someone in, like, and Rob was the only person we could think of that like just made sense, knew the business. We knew him. I'm like, this could really smooth things over. So we did that. And then we had some money in the bank, but we didn't have like an idea.
You did a small round, right? You did a small round, like $1 million came in from existing investors.
We had done a round, I think, actually before doing layoffs. So we had done this Anytime Fitness pilot. And then we were like, hey, it's like, there's some user engagement, like people are using it, but like we need to build a.
Hey, walk me. Let's go through. Let's dive in, because so Anytime Fitness, just the background story, even because it was a big deal.
Yeah, huge. Man, this is another one of those, like, I don't know, just being overly confident for no reason working in our favor sometimes. But we had gone to this, we were in 500 startups. We had gone to this conference where basically it was like speed dating. So you would you would basically sit at a table, and then the like VP of innovation or whatever from all these different big gym companies around the world come sit with you, and you pitch them on your idea. And we pitched Anytime Fitness, and they were like, this is super cool. We're going to run it up to the CEO. Just so happened, I don't know why, again, another serendipitous thing, the CEO and CTO of Anytime Fitness, which is the largest gym chain in the world. I actually was just looking the other day. They're like double the number of locations even when we were dealing with them.
Thousands, it's like 5,000 then now?
Yeah, like 5,000 or 6,000 locations. Like, they're a massive company. They met us, whatever, we're excited. We sent them a deck. We sent them some materials, some of this promo video we had done that was like amazing that everyone loved.
It was a great video.
Yeah, that was a great video. It was cool. It's like the power of storytelling.
That might actually be the best product that we made.
So someone one time made this joke to me. It might have been my brother. He was like, dude, you guys should have just made a video production company instead of Gymtrack. You guys were great at it. And just this other serendipitous thing, we were at 500 startups working out of their office, and the CEO and CTO of Anytime Fitness were coming to San Francisco for this technology tour. They were going to meet, I think, with like the Fitbit people or whatever, or some other startups that were there. And they came to the office, and they were like blown away by this 500 startups office. Thought it was the coolest thing. And literally in that meeting, the CEO was like, let's do a pilot. Let's go. And we were like, cool, I'll send you the paperwork. And that was it.
Where was their product at the time?
I think it was still a 3D printed pin in my pocket. I think I still had the pin. Like,
yes.
I don't think there was much more than that, honestly. And he was like, cool, this is the future. I totally get it. Like, let's run a pilot. And we're like, okay, cool. And we got to go do that now. But the problem was the pilot, to go do the pilot, was going to cost us like hundreds of thousands of dollars. We didn't even properly think about what a pilot to run with them was going to cost. We had to produce all this hardware at super small scale. It was incredibly expensive. We had to move like an install team down there. We had to like
to Minnesota,
where they had their like innovation center. We like had to spend months there, like updating and firmware physically, like, and like it was the worst idea. It was so stupid. We hadn't even done a real pilot in Ottawa where our whole team was, and we could actually learn how people use the product. We were like, nope. We're going to go from like a 3D printed pieces of plastic to literally the biggest customer in the entire industry without doing anything in between. And it was like destined to fall flat on its face.
To our credit, and I remember we had like a year to deliver on this pilot. So that was like obviously a big clause that we gave ourselves. But yeah, the challenge I think was like, if you actually think about a gym, like it's the worst place for tech. All it is metal, like being moved around, and things we hadn't even thought about. For us, it was like, okay, the hard thing is like AI. It's like machine learning, tracking reps. The hard thing is like putting a thing that actually doesn't fall off a barbell. Like that was the mechanical engineering of it. And so with this pilot, I remember we were totally not ready. We pushed it like 3 more months. And at one point it was just almost embarrassing. And so I think you were like, dude, we have to do it. I just can't push it anymore. So we
were burning so much money a month that it was like, we have to, because if you think back, the plan was raise this seed round, okay? Use the money from the seed round to go launch the Anytime Fitness pilot. sign a bunch more pilots, and get Anytime Fitness to convert from a pilot to full paid customer, and then start to roll it to the rest of gyms, raise a Series A to go fund that growth. So it was, again, this all or nothing. Either Anytime Fitness converts to a full customer, or just, your SOL. And back to kind of how we got on this tangent was like, that was around the time we had to raise additional money because we were like, the pilot's taking longer than we wanted to and whatever. And, so we kind of went back to the well.
So obviously the pilot ends up like not, let's say fully working out. All this stuff happens with the acquisition. Rob, you come on, and then how do you, like, can you remind me like how you came up with effectively Gymtrack V2, like the second idea?
I mean, I came on, finishing that Minnesota story, like the challenges of doing that, like it was still operating when I came in the first time. And I remember having to send teams down to go charge the devices. Remember that? Like they couldn't figure out how to charge it. So we had to fly somebody to Minnesota to go and plug shit in and swap them out when the batteries died. Do you remember that? Like
that's
that was
crazy.
unbelievable.
I think when they say do things that don't scale, they don't mean that. That's too far. That's way too far.
That's crazy.
You had to send somebody down there to go and plug stuff in to charge them, right? Anyway.
Hardware is actually hard. And somebody said that to me maybe like 6 months into Gymtrack, and I was like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, obviously there's got to be some advantage to doing hardware. There is no advantage. There is zero advantage for us to do hardware. It's just harder, period, and you get nothing for it. Nothing.
I mean, you do get a moat. You do get a moat because it's hard. But like, yeah, I would say it's, if anyone asked me today, do you want to go do a hardware startup? I would like fall on the ground laughing and like, just walk away.
The trade-off is not worth it, because like it only gets easier and easier to replicate, and like whatever R&D costs you went through and all the shit you went through, like everybody gets that for free. And so it's like,
yeah. And I think there's tons of examples now, like even if you just choose fitness, of like hardware companies being terrible. Peloton, Mirror, like all of these ones that are like, you need the hardware to build the future. It's like, actually, no, you don't. You just need an iPad with software on it. It's the same thing. Like, I think there's tons of examples of why building hardware isn't.
Well, they all started with, wouldn't it be cool?
Yes.
Like, that's where they all started.
Yeah, exactly.
But we were trying to figure out what the next iteration of this was. So when I came on, I kind of said, okay, we're going to really assess this platform and its viability over the next 90 days. So I went down to Minnesota and I met with them, and I remember them saying, "Please take this out of our gym." Like that's what they like. So,
oh god,
NPS 0. Yeah, right.
NPS -10.
Right.
It really was. Like, I think people are leaving the gym because of this. Could you please take it out? So it was a shock to me, clearly, and I was like, okay. And so then I brought that back, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what's the next model? And then, like, Lee, you and I went to one of those resorts, and we went off to, I think it was
Civic.
We
went to one of those speed dating things to talk to customers. Yeah,
and we talked to them, and we're saying like, okay, so we were pitching ideas, and the idea was like this last thing, and it was Mordechai who was like, sensor, simplicity, right? And so it was our lead like scientist, I don't know who was building all this. And so we went with that idea in mind, and then we started pitching some of these gyms, and they, again, differently. Like, we weren't saying, wouldn't it be cool if, we would ask them what their challenges are with equipment and equipment breaking. We had really structured questions. And so we were a little bit smarter, but we also heard what we wanted to hear and ignored what we didn't want to hear. And then we took that back. So we pivoted to this idea. We went through the 90 days, and we didn't kill Gymtrack 1, but we just put it aside. Like, well, we thought, okay, what's the easiest way to get into the gyms? Something low lift, low barrier, low cost, easy to install. They could do it themselves. Like, we kind of created this thing, and it ended up being that sensor that tracked gym equipment activity, not the person's activity, because nobody, like, we realized there's nobody going to pay for that. We said, okay, now what about understanding like your utilization of your equipment? And that seemed to resonate enough with the gyms, and we knew who the customer would end up being, which was the gyms. So that's really what went down there. And then the production costs of those devices were so low that we could manufacture them.
Yeah, I think there was a few steps. Like, first of all, so let's talk about the spectrum of like great customer discovery from 0, which is like Gymtrack V1, to like 10, which is like we never did it.
No,
we moved to like a 3 or a 4, right? And there's a few kind of steps towards it. First of all, what we looked at, and I remember this distinctly. Actually, Lee, you would remember maybe this too. Ken McCaskill, our CFO, who had been in software for a long time, as we're thinking through, this change that we're going to have to make, these cuts, he's like, who do you want to leave on the team? Like, what do you want to go and do? We're like, well, our edge is a hardware, so like, let's stick with the hardware team. And Ken was like, are you sure? Like, you guys don't want to just do software?
Yeah, he was like, why don't you just guys go build an app?
You could just build an app.
No, that's stupid.
That's silly, right?
And in that conversation too, I don't know if you remember this, but there was like one time where I like came to the office and I was like, Ken, Pap, I need to talk to you. I know what the pivot is. And I was like, we're going to do Gymtrack, but for people's homes. And my idea was we were going to build like Peloton, but for weightlifting and whatever. There was all these like ideas around it. And you guys looked at me like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I shut that down quickly.
No. I don't even think anyone said anything. You guys just looked at me for a while and I was like, thoughts? And just there was silence. And I was like, okay, I guess that we're not doing that.
Point made. But this is the thing. Like, so my first point is the missed opportunity was we still started from, okay, what do we have? What can we do? Versus like, okay, we actually met with all these gyms. We could just do real research. So we skipped that. By the time Rob came on, we already had kind of this hardware type team. So it was clearly we needed some hardware device. We wanted it to be simpler. That's why we did what you did. And then the other thing that happened is that original conference where you met like a bunch of different gym owners, we thought it was really smart to like pre-sign for a year ahead because we got like a 20% discount. So now comes that time where we've like trying to cut costs desperately and it's like a $25,000 bill. And we're like, hey, like, we're not going to go this year. We're not going to pay. They're like, you're paying. We're like,
right.
We're not. They're like,
we agreed to go, but we signed a contract, but didn't pay. And they were like, you're coming.
But we're like, but listen, we have no product. Like, we have nothing anymore. It's like, well, you're paying for it. So we're like, okay.
Right.
So we started working backwards from that. It was like, okay, well, let's get something together, presentation together that we could at least pitch to these gym owners. And so we moved up a little bit because all of a sudden it was like, okay, let's at least have these real conversations. Let's ask them what they think. Let's like really care and listen. Let's go through pricing, which is another thing that we went through. But the problem was we still jumped the research phase. Like, we actually didn't do any real research. We had our idea and we were just like validating the idea. So what happened was Rob and I we meet 20 gym owners and like of real chains, like solid people, and everyone loves it. Like, I don't know if you remember, Rob, they like,
ate it up.
Elated after day one because every meeting was like, oh, this makes total sense. I don't know what equipment. The idea was, to be clear, these little sensors, they go on every piece of equipment. They can measure when it's used or not used. And then they can report a dashboard to gym operators so they can buy equipment more intelligently instead of buying it blind. Right. And our motto, by the way, this is total tangent, but it was called free the reps. They're stuck in your treadmill. You got to get them to the cloud. Free the reps. We make shirts. I still have it.
The cloud.
I still have it. I still have them.
I'm going to get a t-shirt that says free the reps.
Free the reps.
I got to get
right?
a t-shirt that says that. That's so funny.
So, but anyways, the important part of that is...
I forgot about that.
No, that's the important part. The important part is the free the reps motto.
Like, that's a win. That's a huge win. And then by the second day, like, to the point that we sit down with people and they're like, oh, you're the Gymtrack guys. Like, XYZ told me about it yesterday, over drinks. Super interesting what you guys are doing. This makes total sense. And so we walk out of there like, man, we've got it. Like, we really got it. Dude, we got, I think, exactly 0 sales. Maybe one pilot out of that. Yeah. 20 people being like, yes.
University of Calgary. Like, they were interested in it. Like, that was the follow-up.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think when you sit down with customers, they want to tell you this stuff to your face? Like, what's the lesson in that?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like, when you skip research and you go to product, obviously we thought it through. It's not like it was a stupid thing. It was like, listen, you have 30 treadmills. It costs you $10,000 a treadmill. That's $300,000. And you could have bought 25. You could have bought 35. You have no idea. Well, that makes a lot of sense. When you go to somebody that's a gym operator and you're like, doesn't that make sense? First of all, they see all the work you've put into it. So they're just predisposed to be like, yes. But you know what? It does make sense. They're like, dude, that actually makes a lot of sense. I should really pay for this. Then when you call them and you're like, hey, let's move forward. They're like, well, I got to open up a club today. So like, sorry. Well, this thing happened with my members. Sorry. What you didn't discover because you started at the idea instead of at the problem, whether it's a problem, but it's problem number 10. Like that's the problem, is that you're solving problem number 10 and you keep hearing next quarter, come back next quarter, come back next year until they just ghost you because they're just like, whatever, like I'm not interested anymore.
Well, because there's always going to be, in any business, there's always going to be pressing issues. There's always going to be new issues that come up. And if you're not this like severe pain point that they have, you're always going to get pushed to the bottom of the pile.
Correct.
It's all going to happen over
Customers
and over
don't
again.
buy any ROI. They buy the best ROI they can get. So like if
Yes.
you're ROI number 10, but they got 1, 2, 3, they're always going to go back to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
It's like, that's why like a lot of times it's like when you're thinking about like a competitive landscape for a product, it's like there's a whole other set of competitors, which is they're solving problems for their customer that you're not even thinking about, right? They're not direct competition. They are just competition for dollars.
For wallet, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, for wallet and for mind share and wallet share. It's like they're not direct competitors at all, but they kind of are because they're solving a bigger problem for the customer.
The big revelation was about...
Well, there was two other companies that were doing similar things. Right? Remember that we had competitors out there, and they were doing it it was very costly to implement them, and their technology was very costly to maintain, or they were doing it manually. Like there was one guy who would go to all the gyms and like sit there with a checkboard.
I
Remember
forgot
that?
about that guy, the consultant. Yeah.
And so, and we got friendly with him, and he was a nice guy, and we were trying to sell him our sensors to make his job a lot easier. Like we were looking for ways to partner, but we looked at the competition as well. So here's another lesson not to do. And we were saying like, how can we make it cheaper and easier than what they're doing, right? And we had this idea of what it was. We got to 3 of 10 in research. We got the feedback, the visceral feedback from the conference. Then we came back and we started looking at the competition. We said, okay, we're going to make it cheaper and easier. And we did. We made it cheaper and easier to use our technology. But the problem was that the total, like the market for this was just those 2 guys and their 3 employees. And we didn't realize that it wasn't as big a problem. Can you imagine going to a gym and saying, we're going to put all these sensors on and we're going to tell you how much you overspent on the equipment you already bought? Like that's what we were telling them. Like,
It's also too, it's not like it's like sensors for a restaurant to tell them how much produce to buy on a daily basis that they're constantly doing. A gym buys equipment and then they never buy equipment again for like 20 years. And so it's like, if you don't understand your customer intimately, it's so easy to make these logical, come up with these logical fallacies in your mind that you're just like, take these leaps that like make no sense at all.
how many times do you open your fridge? That's what we were basically solving for them. You're like, it didn't make a difference.
For me, the part that really hit it home was when we finally get a pilot somewhere in I think it was in San Diego, San Jose, I think. We get a pilot in San Jose and massive club. Finally, so much work for like $3,000. And we're going in and we have to install. By the way, we have to go, like just the plane tickets there, like we're already negative kind of LTV to CAC something. But
what's your CAC to LTV?
Right.
Don't ask.
Don't count the flights. We're good. So we're installing the things and I'm talking with the operations person and he's taking me around the gym as they always do. They show us everything. And the guy's like, yeah. And so like actually over here, like I just got 4 new leg presses and 4 treadmills that are on the way. I'm like, oh, how much you spent? He's like $80,000. Like, man, that's what we're supposed to solve. You just spent $80K today. You woke up and you were like, man, we need more and you spend $80K. And I've been hustling for like months for 3 and I have to come here and install it. Dude, we're doing something wrong. Right? Like that was just, yeah.
That's when I said, shove that voice down your throat and fucking keep going, Pablo.
Don't think.
But then we did a pilot in Ontario with Movati as well. So we started to get, like, the problem was we got that momentum. And I go to the Movatis here in Ottawa and I still see our sticker on all the equipment every single day. And it's like, I see it every day. And I'm like, there's legacy there, right?
A reminder of what could have been. Yeah. But that's the thing. That's the danger is when you actually get, like, if you put something out and you get nothing, it's easy. You crush it. It's easy. When you're in this middle zone, you gain some traction, but it's not enough. That's where you can just spend tons of time wasting it. But I think ultimately the question is, and you're not always ready to answer it, but it's, am I truly solving a number 1 or number 2 priority? Like if I go to my ICP within that gym, which is the operations lead, and I ask him or her, like, what do you think about every day? Do they really say the problem I'm solving? That's like the thing that you always got to come back to I think, to ground yourself.
Well, we would even look at, so these dashboards that we were making, right? So they were web-based dashboards, and we would look at utilization stats, not the gym equipment, but how many times people logged in, and it was next to none. Like, never did they log in. And then Pablo would spend a day writing these reports on like most used equipment, and we would send them individual. Remember that as well? Like, we would send these reports, never opened. Like, it was, so there was telltale signs there.
I think because it's like if the gym owner or the gym operator is in the gym every single day, like, they don't need sensors. Like, their eyeballs work better than the sensors. The pen and paper or an app on your phone works better than Gymtrack V1, right? Like, it's like this kind of whole thing of, again, if you build it, they will come. Like, no, like, they're already doing something, and that thing probably is better than what you have. I think, again, Pablo, you've talked about this before. Like, if your customer is using pen and paper to solve their problem today, your competition is not the 10 other software companies trying to solve it. Your competition is the pen and paper, and you got to be better than that. And yeah, status quo is the competitor. So how do you be better than that?
So let's shift gears. I think we're getting close to the end here. I want to know something that you probably get like zero value out of, but it's funny. So let's do that. So here's my intro. Okay.
I'm here for the jokes. I'm not here to give anyone value.
That's right.
My assumption, this is a comedy podcast, right?
that's what we're becoming. Like, over time, I realized people just want entertainment, so I'm giving them entertainment.
Give them what they want.
Okay, so here's Elizabeth Holmes, founder of Theranos, gets on Forbes, jail. Right? SBF, founder of FTX, gets on Forbes, jail. We get on the cover of the Ottawa Citizen, bankrupt. Is there a correlation there?
Thank God it's just bankrupt, right? Like,
yeah.
Do you remember? Like, I don't know what it is like there, but there's something to that kind of like when PR is at max, like company is at bottom, right? Like, but so the Ottawa Citizen, which is like this kind of mainstream local, like for Ottawa, but mainstream newspaper that, like, you know, your mom and dad reads, sort of thing. They come to us and they're like, you know, we're kind of doing deep dives on startups in the region, and you guys are like the top. We want to do, like, you know, in-person interviews, video interviews, like a multi-page, like front cover.
They like came to my house. They were like in my bedroom. I mean, it's like, why are you here?
And we're like, oh, this is awesome. Like, love PR, you know, like, why? Like, so value, like, zero. We're selling to gyms. Like, I just don't, zero. So selling gyms outside of Ottawa. Like, so there's actually zero potential value. We're not trying to hire.
Actually, negative value in doing it, not zero value. It was detrimental.
And then we go through it, and right, like maybe a few weeks before they're going to publish, we have to do layoffs. We have to lay off like 2/3 of the staff. They were already going through it. It was almost done. And I remember asking Ken, do we need to tell them this? And he's like, yeah. And so we got to call them up and be like, this story, like this profile you're doing, super positive of Gymtrack, and just don't publish it. They're like, we're publishing it.
I remember them saying like, it was like this younger reporter, and I remember her being like, sorry, too bad. Like, we're running the story. I spent time on it. We're running the story. Deal with it.
And your profile on it was pretty great.
Oh my God. I think if there was like one thing in my life I could go back and change, it might be doing that interview. It haunts me to this day because, like, you know, the internet is this archive of everything that's ever happened in your life if it's public. And, you know, people still to this day, when I meet them for the first time, are like, oh, I read this article about you. And I'm like, okay, nice to meet you.
That's
like, see you later.
Your quote was ingrained in my brain, which was like, look, like sometimes I don't sleep at night and I can see the office right there.
My office.
I just go over to the office.
Yeah. So I just go to the office and work.
This guy?
I remember.
Remember that picture?
Yeah,
picture of Lee, like,
which is like screw, like, but also screw them. Like, there were so many pictures they could have used, and like, I don't know. I still do that to this day. I still go like this and put my hand on my head. It doesn't mean I'm, you know, it's not bad body language. But I remember, we told Janet Bannister. Janet Bannister was one of our board members. And I remember we told her we were doing the story, and the look on her face. She hadn't even seen the story yet. She hadn't even seen it, but she just looked at me like, oh no, like, what are you doing? And I was like, what? Like, isn't this good? And she was like, oh no, like, why? guys, why? And she understood what we did, which is that like, oh my God, this is a huge distraction. If you're going to start super messy, they're reporters. They're going to try and tell a compelling, interesting story, not show you in a good light. They want to tell the true story of what it's like being in a startup, which means trying to show your skeletons and trying to show the reality of it. And I have no idea what compelled us to think that that was a good idea, but it's a terrible
hype, man. Our mind was in pure hype. And then I fast forward a few years later, I'm in this board meeting with one of our portfolio companies, and the other board member is this guy, Jeremy Levine, who's still on the board of Shopify. He backed like Yelp, Pinterest, like really, really big dude. And the founder just raised a Series A. And so he's like, I'm thinking of doing PR. Like, what do you guys think? Should you do PR? I'm like, I'm not opining. You're like, I'm staying quiet. And Jeremy Levine says, listen, you can do what you want. I'll just tell you this. Every single great company that I backed, they didn't announce their Series A. I'm just like, all right. Like that.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Because if you spend your time doing that, you're spending your time doing the wrong things. I think it's a symptom of a broader issue within a company to spend time talking to reporters that are not industry-specific reporters that are going to get you more customers. It's a symptom of broader failures within an organization.
You definitely want it to be, you want any kind of PR to be based on merit, right? Like based on accomplishment. And that's what, so you would typically, and it takes a while to learn that because, I mean, I went through it in my 20s as well. It's about me, right? Like it is about his ego. And, and
also someone should have given us like media training. Like if you are going to go, like always bring it back to the product and the company. Don't tell stupid stories about your life. Like that's
no,
a bad idea.
No. And you make sure that you have control over the call outs. I have a similar story. Like, and this was one of these times where I won an award once for next generation.
You won an award?
CEO. I did. It was like a merit badge. It was a next generation CEO of the year award, right? And I remember that I was up against people that were way more deserving, but I had been a part of the community for much longer. I'm not saying this was nepotism whatsoever, but I do remember winning this award, and it was such fraud. Like, and that's what you end up feeling like when something goes down, when it goes wrong.
Oh God.
And I got up on stage and I knew, like, so I was running a software company at the time, and I was doing layoffs the next day. Right. So 9% layoffs, 7 employees. One of them, his wife, it was on about to have their second child. She wasn't working, and I'm about to lay this guy off. Right. And so this is in the back of my head. And so they don't tell who wins, but you have to show up. And so I showed up, and I didn't bring any of my family, like not my wife, nobody at that time. I brought my controller, Kim, and she started the day before. Right. Like that's who I brought. And so she's like, okay. What do you mean? I'm like, you're coming with me. Cause it's like, I can't, it's a fraud. It's fraudulent what I'm about to do. And so I'm like, please, God, for the life, don't win. Please don't call my name. And they call my goddamn name. Right. And I get up on stage and it's like, like this is cause that's what being an entrepreneur is. It's like, you're a fraud until you're something. And then you don't believe you're something. So you're still a fraud. And so I got up on stage and I had to accept this award. And Paul Lem, who's a well-known guy in Ottawa, was the other guy on the other side who lost to me. Paul Lem lost to me.
A doctor who saves lives. Yes.
That saves lives. Yeah. He detects early diseases. Like he's a scientist. He's like this. Anyway, he got up and I'll never forget it because the story was the guy who was doing the introduction was the dean of the business school for University of Ottawa. And he got up and he had this long, rambling opening for Paul. He's like, this guy is this scientist. He's this, he's done this. And, by the way, he just wrote a book that he's released on how to be productive book. And going on about Paul. I've known this guy my whole life. Blah, blah, blah. Like it was like a 9-minute introduction about Paul. And then he's like, and the other contender. Oh, wait, what? It's got to be a mistake, right? Like, you can see it, and he's trying to think of like, oh, okay, what can I say? What can I say? What can I say? I have nothing to say about this guy. I have nothing to say. And he's like, Rob Woodbridge, I knew his father. All right, let's get it. That's what he said. And then I won, and you should have seen, he's like opening it up, and he's like, wait.
There's a mistake.
There's a wrong name. Like this. So you have that moment it was wrong. Like it was terrible.
You got to stay away from that stuff. Like those accolades, this, again, back to what we talked about in the beginning, this like validation from the wrong places. Like, who cares how many articles are written about you? Who cares how many awards you win? Who cares about any of this? Who even cares about money you raise? Like, that's not even the end goal. Like, all of it is useless. It's useless. The only thing that matters is the customer, and are you solving a problem for a customer, and are they willing to pay you to do that, and can you scale? And if you're not doing that, the rest of it is just vanity metrics, and it's useless, and is going to, at the end of the day, come tumbling in. I think that's the takeaway.
Full circle right there, isn't it, guys?
Yeah.
Let's stop it there. I think, look, if you listen through this whole episode, there's no doubt that we've helped you become a millionaire, because either we've helped you with your startup, with all the lessons, but even if you get nothing from that, we gave you a foolproof way to make money in the stock market. As soon as a company gets PR, short that stock. If you listen to this episode and the show and you like it, I have a huge favor to ask for you. Well, it's actually a really small favor, but it has huge impact. But whichever app you're listening to this episode on, take it out, go to Product Market Fit Show, and leave a review, please. It's going to help. It's not just going to help me, to be clear. It's going to help other founders discover this show, because the algorithms, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple, whether it's any other podcast player, one of the big things they look at is frequency of reviews. It's quantity of reviews. And the reality is, if all of you listening right now left reviews, we would have thousands of reviews. So please take literally a minute, even if you're just writing like great podcast or I love this podcast, whatever it is, just write a few words. Obviously, the longer the better, the more detailed the better, but write anything, leave 5 stars, and you will be helping me, but most importantly, many other founders just like you discover the show. Thank you.